Hello. It's so nice to be with you this afternoon. Thanks for inviting us to an Idea Gen conference summit. You do so many interesting things, and we're so pleased to be here. I'm Barb Quaintance, and I run the AARP Purpose Prize, which is the only national award for people over 50 who are using their skills and lived experience to make the world a better place. They've kind of given up their day job and are doing something different that they were inspired to do, they're passionate about, and we get to learn about one of those wonderful people today. I'm here today with Terri Winston, who's the executive director and founder of WAM. And I'm going to let Terri tell you what that is. But first of all, Terri, it's so nice to be with you. And I do know that it's Women's Audio Mission. I stole it. There you go. But you tell us about WAM. Tell us what is the mission and what's the work that you do?
Sure. Well, thanks so much, Barb, for having me and having the opportunity to talk about Women's Audio Mission, which is WHAM. And Women's Audio Mission, we're a nonprofit. We're based in San Francisco and Oakland, California. And we're focused on two very critical issues. Less than 5% women and gender diverse folks are creating and shaping all of the sounds and messages you hear every day in the soundtrack of our lives. And then the second half of that is a very serious 70% decline in young women and gender diverse folks entering into college STEM or science, technology, engineering, and math programs. So that intersection between entertainment and technology is something that we want to focus on and get more women, girls, gender diverse folks into that mix.
And what drew you to this work? Tell me about you. What's your story? And how is it that WHAM became so important to you?
Was a long and winding road, but basically I trained as an electrical engineer, and my family is very technology focused. My father's an engineer, my mother's a scientist. And at the same time, I was signed while I was in college as a major label recording artist. So I also have a very strong musical background and spent most of my adult life in the music industry. And when I became older, I became a professor of music technology and recording arts, and noticed that there was an incredibly small percentage of young women and gender diverse folks in our courses. And I was asked why that was so, and I was kind of ashamed to not have an answer. And so WHAM evolved from my exploration of that issue and why that's happening and what we can do to change it. And that's what we've been focusing on for the last 19 years.
Terri, what does it mean to be in the program? If I were a participant in a WHAM program in San Francisco, and I know you're in other places as well, what would I do? What would I gain from it? And kind of what are your principles for the work that is part of WHAM?
Sure. I think whether you're a youth or an adult, we serve both. And the focus is teaching folks to use technology to express themselves in whatever medium they want to get involved in. So it might be you're in a class in our recording studios, which are the only recording studios in the world built and run entirely by women and gender diverse engineers. And so you might be focusing on what it's like to record music, or what it's like to create a podcast, or what it's like to create sound for a picture, for film, or for ads. So you're basically learning all of the technology to create those stories and express yourself across any type of entertainment or media that we consume every day.
And do you serve or work with, I shouldn't say serve, but work with high school students, college students? Are these folks who are thinking about the music industry or music technology as a career path?
It's actually all of those. So we primarily serve middle and high school youth in our youth programs, and then we're serving about 2,000 of those every year now, with 50 plus school partners across Northern California. And then in addition, there's like another 1,000 adults that we serve that are anywhere from college age to we had somebody in their 80s. In our class that just wanted to learn a new skill. And it was fabulous that they wanted to do a podcast. They wanted to make a podcast. And we were like, this is great. We want to teach you how to make your own podcast. And they did that. So it's really fun to see kind of that intersectionality of youth working with adults. And, a big part of our programs, we also have an internship program, which is essentially training college-age women and gender diverse folks to be the mentors for the youth in our programs, for our middle and high school girls. And they gain a teaching skill, a leadership skill, in addition to, it's the best way to learn something is to teach it. So that's a pathway that we provide as well.
Now, do you work in the schools? You've talked a lot about middle and high school. Do you work in the schools? Do they come to you? You have to have a formal partnership with the school system in order to do so. How's that go?
That's a great question. So yes, we do them on site at the schools, and we also do them in our studios when we can. So our favorite way to do it is in our studios because it's such a magical place. You can see behind me, it's just a beautiful, magical space to be in. But oftentimes the geography or the time component is prohibitive to us, providing that transportation to get to our studios. So then we do a lot of on-site work where we bring all the gear with us so that they can learn what that's like, to learn that technology. But at the same time, those youth might take a field trip to our studios. We just had one of those the other day. That's part of at the end of their training. They might be able to get at least to the studios for a field trip. But we do have we have formal partnerships across 3 school districts, directly with the school district, San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, and then with 53, 54 schools in the area.
Yeah. I'm curious, obviously your background was a big part of what led you to this work, but founding a nonprofit is a big lift, right? There's all the administration and management. How did you decide, or did it just happen to be, but rather than working through another organization or becoming part of an organization, how did you decide to start Women's Audio Mission as its own separate nonprofit?
Well, it started actually, it wasn't my original intention ever in my entire life to start a nonprofit, actually. Not what I thought I was going to end up doing, but when I was a professor, this grew out of a cohort of what we called peer mentors in the program. They were advanced students that were mentoring folks coming into the program early. And so I had a cohort of a few women in the program that we decided to kind of meet regularly and really try to get the enrollments up. And that's how we ended up getting the enrollments at City College of San Francisco, where I taught, up over 50%, which was really high across the nation. And then I just started getting called to come to other schools and talk about how we did that. And so, it became kind of a necessity to start a nonprofit, to have a place to store all these best practices. Essentially, I didn't want to keep traveling all over and talking about it. And so I think starting a nonprofit was a way to do that. And I will say it was much harder than I thought. It required, I learned so many different skills over the years. I'm still learning all these skills over the years, but we were working through City College of San Francisco with the school, and it just became, they couldn't take on the liability of something that wasn't under their, totally made sense. They were incredibly supportive, incredibly supportive, here, use the space, use that. So I knew immediately when we were hitting things that they were like, well, this isn't one of our classes, so we can't do this. And then, I think what's hard is with, like, say, city government, it's not a place to start. Like, we became very embedded in, the city of San Francisco in particular is a huge supporter and has helped us essentially buy property, not financially, but functionally as a nonprofit. It's hard to buy property, but they've helped us in so many different ways. But it was after, we had established a presence for ourselves, and then they could say, okay, how could we help you do this on a bigger scale? Then the city government was incredibly helpful and supportive. But to start it, it wasn't, they're not going to take that risk. It was kind of like I had to take that risk first and show people, like, this is what it would look like. So yes.
So I have one more question about the nonprofit part of this. If somebody came to you and said, I want to start my own nonprofit, not necessarily about music or technology or anything, but I want to start a nonprofit on something I care about, What are 3 things you'd say, you got to know this? You got to know this to get started.
I think the 3 things would be: 1, you should be expert in the thing that you're going to start the nonprofit about. It's not because that's going to be the least of your, you need some place where you don't need to learn things. So whatever, and, luckily I was an educator, for over a decade, and I was an audio engineer and a musician for 20 years prior to that. So I didn't have to worry about that expertise or convincing people I had the expertise. I already had that experience. So that would be 1. Make sure you're expert, at least functionally, in the thing you're going to work on. And I think 2, what was really helpful skill for me to have was already writing grants and writing proposals for my job as a professor. And then things like knowing what a theory of change is, and being able to figure out what the theory of change is for your organization. That's so simple. There's so many resources on how to create a theory of change. That's the first thing I would do. Is it would really help your language on what exactly are you trying to change, and then really crystallizing how you're going to do that. So I think that theory of change piece, and then tied to that is kind of like a business plan, strategic plan. Just learn what that looks like. Like, what's a SWOT analysis? Like, what are these kind of, because they're all used in nonprofits. I think the misconception is that nonprofits don't operate like businesses, and it's just not true. I mean, we actually do. We just take the profits and put it back into the organization. So all of those business skills, I think, were really helpful to me. And I was just before this call talking to somebody who's like, how do I write grants? And so I did this. I was like, look up theory of change and look up basic business plan, and just make sure you can do both of those things for whatever it is you're trying to change, and start there.
That's such a great summary, because it indicates you have to have credibility, right, to do the work. You can't just say, boy, I like music, so I'm going to do this. And you have to be professional. Nonprofit does not equal unprofessional, right? It has to be a professional operation. I'm going to get back to that grant writing thing in a minute, but one thing I haven't asked you that I'd like to get in is, how do you measure success in the program? Is it the number of people who come through? Something else?
That's another, I should have added that in your other question. That is something like metrics, like what are you going to measure? How are you going to measure success is really, and that's incredibly important for us, just so that we can make sure, are we serving our communities? Are they happy with it? So we do it from multiple directions. We obviously are quantitatively measuring success. Like, how many people did we serve this year as opposed to last year? Are we serving particular communities? And then the other half of that quantitative is the qualitative analysis. So we do both internal and external evaluations of our programs. And this could look like surveys, pre and post program surveys. It could be one-on-one interviews with mentors and students to assess like how they're feeling about the program. Did they consider it a success for themselves? Were they happy with the instruction they received or the support that they received? Same with all of our programs, from our conferences to our courses for youth. We're definitely surveying and kind of always also retooling those surveys. Like, are we asking the right questions?
Right.
Because we're trying to get at quantitative, like, are people getting jobs after they're done with this? But also, like, are they happy? Did they feel like this was a great program for them? I think both sides are equally important, but I do think the metrics for us, we're very metric. We meet monthly and look at what's this look like compared to last month. How are we going to do by the end of the year? And of course, financially.
Yeah, I was going to say it's hugely important for grant writing, right? Not just to download data, but to be able to tell the story with your data. So. Sure. Great. Absolutely. That's great. I have a question that I swear I will never ask after, I don't know, December of this year, and that's about COVID. Obviously, COVID had an impact, I'm sure, on your staff and your ability to do things in person. I guess my question is more about how did it, if you want to talk about how it affected you, but also were there things that happened in COVID or new programs you built or anything that you're going to keep going with? Thank you to COVID instead of COVID.
For us, the biggest eye opener was COVID really unearthed a huge global demand that we knew we had it, but we didn't know the extent of it. And so our enrollments actually went up during COVID when we moved everything virtually, obviously right away.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that we had experience doing that prior to COVID, so it wasn't a huge shock to transfer that to our entire staff. But instructionally, everything went virtual, and that's when we were, right in the thick of COVID. We were serving 1,400, people through that whole year from 30 countries. So that was the big eye opener, was just the persistence and amount of global demand that we weren't, addressing before COVID. And then I think, we did learn that some things translated well virtually. Our youth, we're back to in person, and that's really important, especially for youth. They just really need that in person instruction. But we realized that some of the online materials that we had created was helpful to them to extend their learning day further. So if they wanted to go home and continue working on something, they could continue to do some training at home without, just that hour and a half touch point after school. So it gave some tools for people to do online on their own time, in their own pace. So those were things that were helpful for us to learn, and how we could create those quickly and effectively.
I bet it helps though for the kids particularly to be back together for this kind of thing.
Oh, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It was really heartbreaking to see the reentry and how starved they were. Like they would just huddle around a computer together, even though we were like, social distance. They were like, no, we miss each other. It's heartbreaking. So heartbreaking to watch that.
I'm going to ask you two more questions, I think. And the first one is my favorite question. And that is, tell me a story. Tell me a story about someone who is in your program, who just, it warms your heart to see what they've done, or you pick the story, but I'd love to hear about somebody who really benefited from Women's Audio Mission.
Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit. It's a story about multiple people, but it's something that just happened. So it's top of mind and really important to us. We just completed a partnership with ESPN on a class that was composing for TV, film, and ads. And they supported 25 different women and gender diverse composers from all over the country. And this was an effort to get more women composers into the TV world. And so it was really nice to see a corporation really, put support behind that. So we had a whole training course. So they got to not only learn how to compose for that medium, but they got to present their work, each and every one of them, to the actual music directors for ESPN. And then ultimately ESPN bought 8 of the songs or pieces from the composers. And so it was like a dream for there's no access like that ever. And they were so emotionally happy with having this incredible opportunity that potentially just jump-started 8 people's careers instantly. Like they're, potentially composing for ESPN now long-term. So that was a really nice, usually we see these one by one, like we had just placed somebody at ESPN, ironically, one of our former interns at ESPN. So I love that story of okay, we got you into public television, then you moved to ESPN, and to see how they had started as an intern. But this, we got to have, 25 trained and 8 chosen within 3 months. So,
that is fantastic.
Yeah, that was
supposed to make your heart go crazy and remind you why you do what you do. That's so great. That was lovely. I love that. I hadn't heard that story, so thank you for sharing it.
just happened, and it looks like it's going to be an ongoing partnership. So we're really excited about that.
Congratulations. Congratulations. I have one more question. It's more another story for you to tell, perhaps, and that is you've talked about writing grants, but I understand that you received, what do we call it, an unrestricted donation. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. This is big news and should have a big effect for WHAM, right?
I think you're talking about the Mackenzie Scott.
I am.
Yes. So last year we received a very unexpected surprise $1 million gift from Mackenzie Scott to support the expansion of our programs to Los Angeles and Nashville, because we've been working on that plan for a while and just trying to figure out a way to execute it. So it was lovely to get this gift, which is essentially the hardest donation to get in a campaign. So we're in a $9 million capital campaign for those 2 locations, but it's great to have. And that gift is essentially, we think it's already been matched. So we're
oh my gosh.
I think I think we've matched it. I'm pretty
That's
sure. So it was a great way to kick that off and seed our expansion.
I don't know if folks who are listening and watching this know about Mackenzie Scott. Has a great deal of money. And nonprofits don't write grants. She and her people do research, and they find exemplary nonprofits, people who are doing wonderful work well, and she hands over some money with very few strings attached, as I understand. But as you say, it can also really jumpstart expansion, new programs, etc. So congratulations on that. Must have been a day.
Yeah, it was a great day. It was an amazing day. And yes, to not have done, I didn't write it,
Right.
None of us wrote anything. It just was a phone call. And then that happened. And yeah, it's an amazing way. And there was definitely research, because they knew about certain things that we were doing. So obviously they are looking for, I think in this case, they were looking for folks that were expanding in this particular kind of technology and music and media.
Well, you're downplaying it. It's a wonderful, wonderful recognition of your work. So congratulations.
Well, so is the Purpose Prize.
Well, there you go. I should have mentioned that Terri is a fellow this year of the Purpose Prize. And I just got to, because of all this COVID nonsense, we only met in person a couple months ago. So that was an honor.
It was lovely too.
Well, lovely. Terri, thank you so much. Your story, your personal story, the story of Women's Audio Mission is just inspiring. And I'm so glad you're having the success you're having. And thank you for sharing that with us today.
Well, of course. Well, I appreciate you having me and having the opportunity to talk about Women's Audio Mission. And we appreciate AARP and the Purpose Prize and the support you've given us.
Well, go get them. That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone watching. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Barb.